What's up, YouTube? So today I'm finally excited to say I'm going to be installing air conditioning on my 1966 C10. It's probably going to be a two-part, possibly a three-part video. Part one, we're going to be upgrading to electric fans, and while I have the radiator out doing all that stuff, we're going to go ahead and probably mount the condenser, any of the hard lines, and any other parts and pieces that need to be mounted to the radiator core support. We'll go ahead and do that in part one. Part two, more likely just going to be everything that goes under the dash, the main unit, and then all the stuff out here, lines, compressor, and all that. All right, guys, I'm really excited, and I hope you are too. So let's get to this. When I did the radiator, I did an engine swap in 2019. Went from the original 283 sitting over there on the stand to this 350 here. And the original radiator could not keep up with the cooling needs of the newer engine. So I had to upgrade to this one, which is a Summit Racing brand. There's no video on this because basically I just swapped radiators. I thought it was pretty simple. I didn't really do anything. But I'll go ahead and show y'all when we pull this out. Go ahead and put a link in the description. You'll get to see the radiator. It's aluminum, 3-row. And I want to paint this thing because I wanted to paint it when I installed it, but if there was any leaks, any pinholes, or any issues, I didn't want to have it painted and then not be able to return it. So that's why I left it as is. But I'm having no issues with it. So when we get it cleaned up, oh yeah, can you see that? We got a few guys that showed up to the party, but it got a little bit too warm for them, so they didn't make it. So when we finally tear this thing down, we'll get all those guys cleaned off, get this radiator cleaned up. Once everything's mounted and test fitted and all that stuff, then we'll go ahead and paint it, and we'll probably go ahead and paint the fan shroud as well. All right, guys, unfortunately, I got to rambling again, so I need to go ahead and stop using this, start using this. That way we can get this radiator out. Drain the coolant, hoses, fan shroud, fan, and I should have this radiator out in no time. Drank a lot of water this morning, guys. So here's the electric fans I'm going with, the old Durale Performance. That's the part number. All links will be in the descriptions of everything I'm using. Real quick, I thought I'd show you. Here's all the list of part numbers in case you want to pause it with all the different dimensions. That's the dual fan side, and then all the part number and dimensions is for the single fan, depending upon which one you want to go with. I went with the 16833 because those dimensions right there were the closest to the radiator. So let's go to the radiator. All right, here's the fans right here. Everything's already put together. It's got these rubber flaps, some holes drilled in there. I think that flap opens up when you're driving down the highway. While the fans aren't spinning, lets a little bit of air flow through it. This is the biggest shroud, or it may be in theory the smallest shroud, but that would fit the radiator as best as possible for the dual electric fan setup. See, it's right here rested on the bottom side of the tank, but there's a little gap on the top. You could go the other direction and leave the gap on the bottom. I'll figure that out one way or the other, but right now I got it this way. It doesn't matter. Here's all the hardware it comes with. You got your nuts and bolts, washers, all that stuff, weather stripping, your mounting brackets, which is the problem I'm having because this thing's slightly too wide. These aren't going to work. They're just not going to work no matter. See what I'm saying? Just not going to work. So I have this piece of aluminum that was originally like that. You see those two holes that are drilled in it, because this radiator is slightly narrower than the original. The original would rest up against these factory plates or whatever that the shroud mounts to, and they come with this weather stripping to kind of seal everything off. Well, with the other radiator being slightly narrow, it left a gap here. So I put that piece of angle aluminum, and that filled in the gap. So that's why I'm using that. So I'm thinking there's two options. Let me get this centered back up. All right, got this centered back up. So I'm having two options here. One, could do it like this. Really the only downside is you can't use the slots to mount it. It doesn't cover them up. But there's enough meat here, you could drill your own holes. Don't need to be big holes, just small ones. And then mark this somehow and then bend it down and then mount it to this surface here. The other option is like that. Trim it down on the inside so it don't cover up too much of the fins. The only issue is when I go to screw it down, drill holes or whatever, there's going to be a space. So I'd have to use some kind of spacer to support that. So I'm thinking the other option is going to be the better way to do it. It's going to work out better, and I think it's going to look better, and probably even seal better as well. But I can also fill this area in with some of this foam insulation. That works out good sometimes, and it kind of will be hidden inside there, so I think it'll work out okay. All right, guys, you see where I'm at. Here's the radiator, by the way. This is the Summit Racing brand. We'll look it up, put the link in the description. That's a pretty good radiator, 3-row. It's got your, if you got an automatic transmission, there's your spots for the transmission cooler. Comes with that. That's really, really close to the frame. So it's kind of, you kind of have to unbolt the radiator. It's kind of lifted up, then you could rotate this. And on your factory brackets, you will either have to make your own cushions like that, to, you know, your rubber mounts. That's the upper mount. Same thing with the lower mount. You got to do the same thing. You don't have to do that. You can cut the originals, but I didn't have the originals. I had brand new ones and I didn't want to ruin them, so I went ahead and did that. I think it worked out okay. All right, let me figure out the mounting situation. One side down and one side to go. Looks pretty good. Covered up those slots barely. Debating whether I want to add another screw because a bit of an air gap there. At the same time, I don't want a whole lot of screws on the side. I think it looks good like that. So I think for now I'm going to leave it like this. Go ahead and do the other side. See how it turns out and we'll go from there. I'll show you how I did it as far as the bending process here. The reason why you sandwich it in between two pieces of metal so it doesn't flex while you're trying to bend it. Yeah, it draws it up nice and tight. Look at that. Works out pretty good. No marks, nice and straight, everything's level. Perfect bend. That's a very useful tool. All right, guys, I'm done with it. I think these brackets turned out really nice. I think I'm just gonna stick with 3 screws from shroud to radiator. I think it looks nice there. Turned out really well. That bending tool worked great. Air gap's not too bad, a little bit. I could put another screw there, but I don't want to. I think it looks fine just the way it is. I think what I am going to do is fill that gap that's in there with some of this foam. We'll have some more of this stuff. It'll fit in there really nice, and it'll kind of seal that off really good. Went ahead and decided to go ahead and leave the gap on the bottom instead of on the top. That way you don't have to see that little 1/4 inch gap of fins. It's all sealed up on the top. I already did add the weather stripping on the top and bottom. I may not be able to do it on the inside just because it's sandwiched in there, so not too worried about it, but that's where this will come into play. All right, let's move over to the truck and test fit this radiator, see what it looks like. Right here. Set that in there like so. I'm not gonna bolt this down, we're just gonna set it in here, kind of hold it in place. See how that looks. Looks pretty good. Obviously that's the spacer for the fan, that's gonna be gone, and just bolts will be holding the pulley, so that's not gonna be sticking out like that. Now that everything's been test fitted, looks great. I need to go ahead and take everything apart, clean up the radiator, and skeet a little black epoxy paint on here, satin black. Get this thing all blacked out, make it look really nice, and to put it all back together for the final install. Alright guys, new weekend. Radiator's already painted, fan shroud's painted, all put back together. I have not officially assembled the fan to the radiator because I want to keep that all empty and clean, because now we officially start getting into the actual air conditioning install portion of this video. And the box in front of me contains the condenser, hard lines, bracketry, and all the hardware you're going to need more than likely to install the condenser. In my kit I got 3 boxes. The other box is the compressor by itself, and then you get a huge main box which has pretty much everything else that comes in the Vintage Air kit. So without further delay, let's go ahead and quickly glance over what comes in this box and turn our direction to under the hood of the truck and let's start getting these parts installed. So real quick glance, I went in and took out the packaging. There's your condenser right there. Get that out of the way. This is I believe the dryer. Let's see what that looks like there. Yeah, there's the dryer. Get that out the way. There's the small block Chevy compressor mount. Check that out. Under comments it says wonderful day. That's pretty funny. Brackets, hoses, some mineral oil. I think that's what you're supposed to use around those O-rings. Hardware over here. Switch. Now, one thing I do need to go over. If you order this kit and nothing else, you're going to get a binary switch. I ordered a trinary switch because I am switching to electric fans. So if you have electric fans and you want the fans to come on when you turn the AC on, then you have to add or upgrade to a trinary switch. I think it was like another $45. So that's what I did. Alright, that's pretty much what's in this box. Let's go ahead and take everything out and move to the direction of the truck. Sorry, I might have to have the fans on this weekend. It's going to be a pretty warm weekend, so hopefully that's not disturbing. I'll just try to talk a little louder. Anyways, I kind of skimmed the instructions, and there's some holes you got to drill into the core support. So I believe I'm going to have to take this out for sure. And I'm going to go ahead and remove both covers. So I'm also, when I start wiring in the electric fans, I'm probably going to try to hide it up under the core support, and I'm going to need these front covers out the way. Really easy, not too difficult to do. So I'm gonna go ahead and get these out the way and we'll go from there. All right. So according to the instructions here, looks like you need to remove the radiator, which I've already done, your battery tray, and the passenger side baffle, which is that cover I was talking about earlier. I went ahead and removed both of mine, but you just need to really remove that one. And then right here it says you need to drill an 1.25 inch hole through the core support as shown. Install 2-inch grommet. There's your measurements. I got the 1.25 inch hole saw right there. Slightly used, but should work. So we got to measure that. However, they're showing it looks like from the front, but you know, there's kind of, you got something going on right here in the front. So what we're going to do is we're going to measure it from the back side and do it over here. Looks like it's going to be right in here somewhere, the hole. So let me set the camera up and let's get this hole drilled. It looks like we need to go 3 inches down from this lower, from this bottom louver here that's in the core support. I'm going to use one of these scratch things. It's like 3 inches roughly. Sorry, my melon might be in the way. There's 3 inches. And we got 2 inches from the edge of the core support here. Alright. My little punch thing here. There it is. Let me clean these shavings off and stuff, and then get the grommet installed. Alright, one step down and many more to go. Alright, here we go. Now we got the condenser in front of me here. Got all the hardware opened up. According to the instructions, the brackets need to be facing towards you. They can consider this the back view. And then you mount these 2 flat metal brackets here on the 2nd and 4th hole. There's a bunch of holes across here, so this one and this one. There is no washers, it's just a star nut and a little panhead screw. Make it a little easier, use a wrench. Alright, let me repeat the process on this other side. We'll go from there. Alright guys, we got that part, both brackets done. Now we got it flipped back over. Now the next step is installing what they call the dryer bracket, and it goes like this. Let me see if I can get that in the camera. Kind of angles out. The angle out faces towards you or away from the fittings. If you tried to do it the other way, it wouldn't mount. So can't mess that up. And they're telling you to use the 1st and 3rd hole to mount this. So let's get this mounted. I highly suggest before you get this mounted, take the plastic caps that they cover the fittings that come on the condenser. These are extremely tight. They just don't spin off by hand. I had to use some pliers. So I highly suggest removing those first before you mount the brackets. Alright, next thing to install will be the actual dryer. It does have a label, and there you see a direction of flow. You see an in. This is out and this is in. According to the instructions, you want the in facing the condenser and the out obviously facing the other direction. It comes with these 2 clamps to mount it and a couple of sheet metal screws. So let's get this situated and mounted. First things first, I'm going to remove these rubber caps. I don't know if you can hear that, it's under pressure. There is, when you pull it out of the box, there are a couple of O-rings that is taped to the dryer. So make sure you don't lose those. Show you all the instructions so you can see what I'm looking at. See that flow arrow? That's going to the direction of the fittings. So in is on the condenser side more or less, and then out's going to be towards the fitting side. So for me, basically, I'm hiding the label. Looks like, according to the instructions, you use the 3rd and 6th hole on this bracket here. So these 2 right here, and basically this one here and this one here. See a little alignment tool, kind of line those holes up. There we go. Alright, so I slid the camera over slightly. We'll be installing our first hard line. So go ahead and remove these blue protective things. Since the 2 O-rings, I've already kind of installed one, messing around here. since the 2 O-rings came in the dryer, I'm going to be using those O-rings for this area of the dryer. For whatever reason, they came in there and they look slightly thicker than the other ones that are in the kit. So just to play it safe, I'm going to use those. It didn't say one way or the other in the instructions, just said number 6 O-ring, which is the smaller one. The kit does come with oil. You just got to cut the little tip off. So this goes like so. Goes on that bottom fitting there. I had to tweak the line a little bit. Well, can't really tighten that up very easily. Flip this over. See if it's any easier from this end. Well, in all honesty, I don't know how you're going to tighten that with this bracket in the way. Looks like you'll have to take this bracket off, or just not install it, and tighten your fittings there. Let me go ahead and do that. So far, the biggest problem I see is with this bracket in the way, how are you going to tighten these fittings with just normal wrenches? And I'm going to have an issue with this one, because this whole unit has to go in before I put that line in. Those lines have to go to the actual core support. And also, I don't know if you caught it earlier, I didn't catch myself, but the other bracket I had put backwards, or upside down. Corrected that. So just pay attention to the orientation of the brackets. Alright, let me put this back together. Alright, before we get the condenser installed, I went ahead and test fitted, and it is going to work. Everything cleared. Go ahead and remove your cap and put your either binary, which it does come with the binary switch, but like I stated earlier, I'm using the trinary switch, so I'm going to go ahead and install that, and then we can mount the condenser to the truck. Those factory holes where those shroud brackets go. Right now I'm just going to use a couple to hold it in place. Alright, so now I'm going to grace you with the presence of this mug. From the right side? I don't know. I don't know. See if that works. Turn left. Turn right. Make a U-turn. Alright. I'm not liking the way that feels there. I got it. See that? I'm just spinning it by finger. It didn't feel good at first, and I just nope. I do not want to cross thread anything. I don't want to damage none of this stuff. And this, you know, some of this stuff, especially these metal tubing, it's going to be kind of like brake lines. You might have to slightly subtly tweak things just to get everything to line up the way you need it. So don't be scared by that. Try the other way. Well, that's not good. Alright, let's try it without the other line in the way. You know it'll slide in that way. There's that other line. Let's try this again. I'm not supposed to do this. I don't want to pull the grill out for that. That doesn't make sense. I think I figured it out. Sometimes you just got to learn as you go. Let's separate that for a minute. That's alright, Benny Jared. I'll correct the instructions. That way somebody installing this thing can install it right the first time. Set your condenser out the way, I think. That's what we need to do. Get that out of the way. Just gently set it right there. Let's try this again. Guys, I did not test fit any of this. I'm struggling, as you can tell. because these lines, you can't get them in with the grill in the way, and you can't get them in any other way. Woo! Man, that was not easy, guys, at all. So, just a bit of advice. Have your condenser in place, do not bolt it down. Or actually run your lines first, then try to get your condenser and get everything lined up. Make sure you put your O-rings on, the oil they provide on the kit, and as you're threading it on there, if it doesn't feel right, don't keep going. It should spin on there by hand. Once everything's good to go, then you can tighten it. We'll see how easy this fitting right here is going to be to tighten. If I run into any scenarios, I'll explain it, but otherwise, we're going to keep on moving. Not too bad, actually. I thought this might be a concern, but you can get that 3/4 inch on that deal right there. Let me slide my camera like so. And that bracket right there is notched. So you can tighten that up pretty good. All right. Just thought I'd show y'all that. All right, looking good. Only got a couple of bolts holding it in place right now. I got to work out some things before I do the final install. It's good. Got the grommet in there. Yeah, it's better to put the trinary switch or binary switch in first before you install this. But they're telling you to do it afterwards in the instructions. You'd have a hard time getting it in there. You could do it, but a little easier with it off. All right. I got more work to do. All right, got my radiator and fan all together. Looks really good. I think it looks a whole lot better blacked out than it does aluminum. I disassembled the whole shroud, took all these rubber flaps off, fans, everything. Just painted the shroud. Little side brackets I made. Masked off the emblem there. The paint job ain't perfect. I see a little bit of a run there. But for the most part, I think it turned out all right. All right, guys, we'll move this thing to the truck. All right. So we're going to set the bracket in place. All right, I think next step on this install is wiring. I'm probably going to be mounting the relays. I got a thermostatic switch somewhere in this area. There's that 7-circuit auxiliary for painless wiring I got. It's got 3 hots and 4 ignition. Added that when I did the cruise control. I think I said that earlier, but I'm saying it again if I didn't. So I'm gonna probably put, like I said, I'm probably put those relays right here somewhere for the fans and get all that wired up. And hopefully these things operate. I have not tested them yet, but more than likely they do. All right, you see where I'm at? I gotta get to it. So here's the 2 relay kits I'm going with from Painless Wiring. Both links will be in the description. But basically this is just a standard electric fan. If you're gonna run one fan, there's a relay kit there. This one has the thermostatic switch in it, which you can see right there. It's got the probe that pushes through the radiator fins. They also make some that have the sending unit as well. I kind of wanted to go with this, that way I had no wiring going to the engine. So I think this is going to work out. I just got to figure out how to wire these 2 in series. That way when it's whatever I got the thermostat set at, when it does kick on, it kicks both relays on to turn both fans on. And here's the instructions for the trinary switch and the vintage air. So I got to, in junction with these 2, I got to wire all this together to make it work. So I got a lot of wiring to do, so I'm gonna get to it. All right, guys, so it's another new weekend, and I think what I'm gonna go ahead and do to wrap up part 1 of this vintage air install on the old 6 C10 here, I think we're gonna go ahead and remove these heater hoses and go ahead and test fit the compressor brackets and compressor and see if we're gonna have any fitment issues or alignment issues with the pulleys. The brackets, I will show you all the parts over there on the workbench. We'll go over that real quick. but the brackets come raw steel. So before I paint those, I want to install it and see if there's going to be any issues. If everything's good to go, then I'll go ahead and paint them, do the final install on it, and that'll wrap up part one. Part two, more likely we're going to be under the dash at that point installing the other stuff. So let's go to the workbench and see what we got. There it is, the small block Chevy passenger side mid-mount bracket for exhaust manifolds. There's all your hardware and spacers, and then there's the brackets themselves. Looks like they're laser cut, but they are raw steel, so you have to paint them, powder coat them, however you're going to do that. And then right here is the compressor, Sandon SD5H, made in Singapore. What? Anyways, pretend I didn't see that. Some kind of paperwork right there, and there's the compressor. You can get it with a serpentine pulley, but I'm sticking with the V-belt. And I remember them asking me if I wanted it polished. You have to pay extra for that, but I don't want it polished, and I didn't care for all that. So, but if you want it polished, you can pay extra for that. All right, you see the parts. Let's go ahead and get them on the truck and see how they look. First things first, you'll have to remove the front bolt and the center bolt here. Don't take that one out, just the first one and the third one. There's a 1/4-inch spacer, and then there's a 1-inch spacer. And then you got 3.5-inch long bolts. And the instructions, it didn't say anything about putting washers behind the bolts, but if you didn't, the bolts, at least in my particular application, they're too long and they bottom out inside the cylinder head. So I'm using these spacers. I don't think they go anywhere else on the bracket mounting. Let's get these installed. I would recommend a little anti-sneeze before you tighten these up, but for testing purposes, we're just going to run these in for now. Snug there. Alright, next piece, you'll have to remove your upper left water pump bolt. The back of the bracket will go there, and then the curve faces up. There's also a spacer that you may have to use, and in my case I do. There, like there. Yeah, there we go. Alright, on the compressor, you can see right here, let me lower it down a little bit more. Go ahead and get your bolt started. For testing purposes, they do come with lock washers or lock nuts. Those nylon locking nuts, but I'm going to go ahead and use just some standard nuts for testing purposes here. But it is kind of tricky. You got to kind of line this up. There we go. And then your front bolt for your actual tensioning. There's a lock washer that comes with it. Once again, for installation purposes and testing, we're just going to leave it with the flat washer. The bracket does have threaded holes right here. Tighten up all your bolts. But once again, for testing, we're just going to be snugging up everything by hand. Alright, last thing we want to do is we need to check pulley alignment. Make sure everything's going to line up, see what we've got going on here. So what I'd like to do is close one eye and use what I call the chicken eye. Now that I got my chicken eye dialed in, let's turn around and see this pulley alignment. Now that I got that chicken eye dialed in, look at that pulley alignment from the compressor to the water pump. Just ignore the belts. That thing's perfect. So if that's perfect, I know my crank and water pump line up perfectly. So this side is going to be just fine to drive. Now on this side's a little different. When I did the power steering a couple years ago, this is the drive system I came up with. I got basically the water pump is just driving the alternator by itself. It's not engaged with the crank because this bracket right here would interfere. But I found out that they make double groove alternator pulleys, so I need to get one of those, because what's going to happen there is the rear groove of the power steering, front groove of the crank, front groove of the water pump, and then that new pulley would be the front groove. All those would be driven on that one belt, on those grooves. Like I said earlier, the rear groove of the water pump crank would drive the rear groove of the compressor. And I also originally bought a third groove crank pulley in case I needed it. And I might add that because I've already owned it, because I can make that pulley line up with the front groove of the power steering, and that would give the power steering 2 belts driving it. In case one belt broke, I would still have power steering. So I may be adding that as well. Other than that, everything looks great. I think all the alignment, I think I'm not going to have any alignment issues once I get that other pulley. So it's safe to say I can go ahead and remove those brackets and get ready for paint. So you see where I'm at. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up part 1 here. I got a lot of work to do off camera. I still got some wiring to do on my relays. Obviously I got brackets to paint, pulleys to buy, get all that stuff lined up. So when we start part 2, more or less we're going to be removing that heater box because it's no longer needed, and get under the dash and start removing the parts that got to get out of the way there and start installing the main unit. Alright guys, it's going to be a busy weekend for me. Like I always say, until then, thanks for watching.